Join the team.
Hey team, it's McGuire Review, and today we're going to take a look at a brand new board game. Has just recently come out, and you can get your hands on it now, and it is the awesome CTHULHU Wars Duel. Now, this is from Petersen Games. You may know this game from the epic tabletop style game called CTHULHU Wars. This is, you can think of almost a scaled down version of that awesome epic style game. And we get CTHULHU Wars Duel. Now, we're going to go through what this looks like here and some of the things that you're going to get. But if you are a CTHULHU Wars fan, you are going to love this game. If you have always been interested in CTHULHU Wars but have not wanted to drop the price for that game, this will be a great low-cost introduction and option for you that is getting you a lot of what that game is. And that's where I think the value really is with this particular title. So it is an asymmetric strategy game. It's a two-player game. You cannot solo this. This is designed as a two-player game only. Age is 8+, so it is pretty simple. There are quite a few different things you have to do when you go through various different phases. You need to remember and keep track of, and you can do that here right on the back of this book. That is something to know, but it is a pretty straightforward two-player strategy game. And you can play this in 20 to 30 minutes, which is another really cool aspect of this cut of CTHULHU Wars. Because if you know the larger epic-style tabletop game, that one was even designed, I think, very, very well from a timing perspective. I mean, you could blow through a 4-player game in about 90 minutes, definitely under 2 hours.
Even for how epic-style that is.
However, this one, 20 to 30 minutes, which is really cool because you can get a number of games in if you're playing this two-player. So I love the design there from the timing perspective. Okay, that's everything you got. I will say, this is going to be somewhat of a full kind of review of this game. We're going to look at the components. We're going to look at some of the mechanics of the game, what makes it so good. I'll start here with the box. The box is done really high quality, much like all the products that come out of Petersen Games. This is a very high quality box. It's nice thick cardboard. It's got kind of the spotting on there. We've got sort of the different shiny versus matte. Really nice artwork on the front. And you are going to get two different great old one sets that's in this first one that's released. Now they have another one, and that's going to be kind of the model, I think, go forward, is they're going to release a number of these core sets that you can buy. And you'll get two old ones, another different map, which is $29.99. So it's actually pretty low for everything that you get here. I mean, when you look at the awesome artwork, stand-ups that you get, the really cool boards, you get all the tokens, you get these awesome D6 little dice, and they aren't just standard black. They actually have kind of a grayish sort of pearlesque look to them. They're actually really nice, high-quality D6. Everything is top quality in the game, and you're getting all this for $29.99. So I think it's a phenomenal price point. Now, obviously, if you get this at a third-party site, this is going as low as $24 on Miniatures Market right now, this set right here. So, in my opinion, the value is off the charts. I mean, it's incredibly low cost for the value that you're getting for this particular cut of CTHULHU Wars. Okay, so let's get into the actual game here. I'm going to start with the rule book. You are getting the Great Cthulhu versus the Black Goat. Those are the two that you're going to get in this first version that has come out. The rule book is done really nicely, really high quality rule book, lots of big color picture examples. The rule book does feel a little long as you're reading through it, but if you really break it down, a lot of what's here is examples of what they say. One of the things that I think is done pretty well in this rule book is just explaining everything that you're going to actually go through in a pretty high level detail, and then giving an actual play example after that, which is important to ensure that you understand exactly how to play the game. Another thing that I think is interesting about this is I thought that this would actually be even a further trimmed down version of CTHULHU Wars for this duel than what was actually delivered. There's a lot of the same rule sets, you can say, that are built into this as what you will get with Cthulhu Wars. Now, there is a number of differences in how things work, and that is right up front in the book, which I thought was a nice thing to kind of hit those things right up in the front. Because there's a lot of people that play Cthulhu Wars that want to pick up Cthulhu Wars Duel, and they think, okay, maybe it's just exactly the same. It is not, and there's a number of things right here in the front that list out exactly what the differences are. And you can see it's not that many things that are different in this than what is in Cthulhu Wars, the full-scale tabletop game. So I think you're getting a lot of value for your money here in this game. Okay, so let's just do kind of a run over here, and Bear's going to get the overhead on these things as we're going through. But I'm just going to look at Great Cthulhu here's board. Each player is going to get one of these mats. On the other side, there's just, I mean, it's nothing for the game, but it's nice. You get some flavor text, you get a little transcript, and each one of them are different. So it isn't just, you know, the same. I really think they did a nice job with putting, you know, customized things for each one of these versus just generic artwork or just the name of the game or nothing. I mean, they actually took the time to put some things on the back there that add a little bit more flavor to the faction or the great old one that you're going to be playing. So here on the front of the card, it lists pretty much everything that you're going to need for the game. The only criticism that I would say here from a components perspective is it would have been nice if each player would have also got, or if they would have found a way, I don't know, it might have got too cluttered to put, or maybe extended these a little bit, and then you had sort of the phases of the game or all the different actions that you could take. Because that's something that, there is like 7 different actions you can take when it's the action turn, and then remembering the phases of the game. Now, to be fair, those things are put, you know, kind of here, but I just find when each player sort of has that nice matte-coated little reference sheet, it really helps the flow of the game. Even when you are a seasoned player and you kind of know, it's just nice. It's my personal thing. Okay, let's move on. So here you're going to find across the top there the power that you're going to start off with. When you start the game, everybody's going to start with that 8 standard power, and then after you go through round, you're going to be gaining more power. This is the first mechanic that I really like, because as you play around and you take actions, you are, at the end, based on what happens within that, that's what's going to give you sort of an amount of ability or power upon the next round of the game. And that may be significantly different than your opponent. Maybe you have much less power. Maybe you have about the same. Maybe you have much more. And that's an interesting mechanic that has to be balanced. And we'll talk more about why that has to be balanced. But I do like the fact that based on your strategic moves, you can set yourself up for the next round and having more power potentially than your opponent. And there's a number of ways to do that. So that's what you'll find right across the top, is that power that you can gain. Then you're going to have a special unique ability for each one of your great old ones. And those are going to be vastly different. That's the next thing that I like about this. It is sometimes 2-player games, you both have the same abilities, and it's a battle of wits of who can best optimize and use those powers and abilities. With this game, every faction is, and I'll just call them factions, every faction is completely different in about every single way. The spells they have access to, their unique abilities, the actual costs and combat values of the different units they have access to, everything is completely different. It's even different on how you would awaken the great old one as well. So I really like that. And then right below, you're going to find all the different cultist monsters and the great old one. That's going to be standard for each one. But all of your costs, how much it costs to actually summon that unit, and how much combat damage that unit can do, will be listed right here. Or basically how many dice you'll get to chuck when you get into that combat is listed right here. And then you'll see here if there's anything with the spell book when you would kill or devour. It just kind of gives you a little note here to remind you that that would activate one of your spell books that would be out here, or it would allow you to lay over and put spells, because these right here you can think of as achievements. We'll get there in a second. And then at the very bottom, it's how to actually awaken your old one. And that does take a set number of power. It's one of the actions you can do on your turn, is actually awaken your old one. And it says here there are actually 3 different things, kind of steps you'll go through in being able to awaken the Great Cthulhu. So now let's look at this area of the board, which is kind of, you can think of it almost game prereqs to be able to activate your spell book. Now each of the players is going to have a set of small cards here, which is their spell book, and these cards are going to be significantly different for each player. And as you achieve these different objectives throughout the game, you can go to your spell book and choose one of these spells to then lay over that spot, and then from then on in the game, you'll always have that ability or spell within that spot. And that's nice. You know, it isn't a shuffle this and then, you know, you draw like a random top one and that's what you get. You do have the ability to pick up your spell book, go through your spell book, and decide which one of those you want to bring out first based on what you've achieved. So for example, and you can do these in any order, it doesn't have to be like top, left to right, you can do them in any order. It says Awaken Cthulhu. So as soon as you awaken Cthulhu, you can go to your spell book and say, oh, okay, I'm going to select Dreams. And I'm going to put that right here, which now allows me as a player, spending an action cost of 2, it's like a new ability I've gained, I can choose an area containing an enemy's cultist. Your enemy must eliminate one of his cultists from that area and replace it with one from your pool. So that's what Dreams does. I may want to choose Submerge, which is a very powerful thing, only cost 1. If Cthulhu is in an ocean or sea area, so any of these areas here on the map that are water-based, remove him from the map and place him on your faction card, along with any or all of your units in that area. Later, as a 0-cost action, you may place Cthulhu plus all accompanying units in any area. So this makes it very powerful to be able to swarm. You know, you might have something like this all within that area. You can use 1 action cost to submerge into the ocean, and then at another point in time in the game for 0 action, you can just pop up basically anywhere that you want on the board to be able to either capture enemy units or go right into battle. So that's a very powerful ability. It's probably one of the first that I would choose as Cthulhu is grabbing Submerge. So then you can kind of see that there's different types of things, and they all activate in different points in time in the game. So this one is an action cost, so it has to be during the action phase. This was an action cost, that's to be doing in the action phase. Regenerate is post-battle. Here's one that's Absorb, pre-battle. So there's a number of things that you can select, and you can kind of optimize throughout the game your strategy based on if you want to, you know, hey, I want to be ready pre-battle or post-battle and be able to respond, or I just want to get action abilities out there quickly that I can start using in my action phase. So another way to kind of customize your approach in that battle as you play game to game. You can try different, you know, strategies. So I love that mechanic that the spell book offers and all the different types of strategies that you can optimize with your particular old one based on how you bring out these spells. So hopefully you're seeing that this game can get very deep and very rich, and it has a high level of replayability. Even if you decide to say, you know what, I'm just going to get this single box set, I'm only going to have Great Cthulhu and Black Goat, you can play this game a number of times. You can, you know, play the different great old ones. You can do different spell book strategies. It's just, you really have an endless amount of possibilities. And then when you get to saying, oh, I'm going to continue to buy, and that's probably what the model is going to be. They're just going to release, you know, more and more of these where you get 2 factions. Maybe you get an extra little bonus with some of those releases. And then you get more boards, more factions. So you can just kind of see all the combinations and permutations of how you can play this game, stacking every single time you get a new core box unit. And with the low price of these, you know, you're getting a lot of value for your money if you want to get into Cthulhu Wars versus going for the full-scale tabletop game with the giant miniatures, and, you know, that game is very expensive. Now, if you're a huge fan of this, you may want to go all in and get all this stuff. But if you don't have the money to get the full-scale tabletop version of this game, which is very expensive, just the base game plus every expansion is expensive as well, this is the route you can go. Let's just say you get a couple of these around the $25 mark. aftermarket. For $50, you've got 4 factions, 2 boards, and a countless number of ways to play this game, all for around that $50 price point. So it's a really, really great value. I know I keep hitting that, I don't want to sound like an infomercial here, but I really do feel like it is a great value from a gaming perspective for your money. And again, I'm not paid for these videos or anything. I did receive this first version of the game from Petersen Games for free. But again, I don't have to make these videos. I only put videos on the channel where I think the game is actually really good, and it's a really good and fun experience, and it is a great value for you as a gamer. So this game made it on the channel. It's a good game. Trust me, there's a number of games that get sent that never see the light of day of the channel. Okay, now we have been talking a lot, but again, this is going to be a longer video because this is really going to be a full, deep review of the game. So let's get into some of the components that we see here on the board. We've hit pretty much everything that has to do with the players. We will have some tokens. The players will have their cultists. They do start off the game in a specific spot that goes with their gate, and that's why you will see icons on this, not here, we'll talk about what these do, icons on this board that are different than just the ones that come with what you have, because again, it's already designed to be used with different factions that are going to be released at a different time. So every one of these boards can be played with any of these factions, and each box set will have a completely different board, okay, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so we've got those that are out here. You will have a token to track your doom along the way. That has to do with how the actions work in the game. You also will have a token for each player that you will move along this track here. Track how much overall doom you do have. I will say this one right here is actually not, this is for a decay. This is actually called the, I keep burping. Actually, just to clarify, this one's actually called the decay marker. It tracks the decay of doom. And that has to do with the actions. That's what that is for. I'll just talk about that real quick. When it is your turn, we talked about this power. This power will dictate how many actions you can take, because each action takes different number of power, whether it's 1, 2, 3. It takes three actions or 3 power to be able to put a gate out on the board. It allows you to spawn monsters and things into the board if you control that gate. But how this works is, let's say your players have a different amount of power, which will allow them to have less or more actions. If one of the players happens to run out of power and actions, it keeps the other player from just going turn after turn after turn after turn, like just dominating the board with like single point actions. So what happens is every time it's the other person's turn and that person's out of power, they'll move this little decay marker along this track, and the opponent has to pay that much decay out of their power pool before they can do what they want to do. So it's just a way to kind of allow that other player, if they've done good strategic moves to get more power, to not be able to just bull rush the board. They're still going to get some more turns, but it isn't like they can just take turn after turn after turn after turn after turn. So that's a nice mechanic as well to kind of drive that down. And that was one thing I was kind of worried about because of the way that the action points work. So I'll hit that as well now that we're talking about this. When it is your turn and you're taking actions, you are going to take one action at a time. And I love that. It isn't like, okay, I have 10 power, so I'm just going to take, I'm going to use 3 to open up a gate, then I'm going to use 1 to move this person here and here, then I'm going to use 1 to do a battle. It doesn't work that way. You have to just take, okay, I'm going to use 3 power, and I'm going to spawn a gate where I have a cultist. Okay, I opened up a gate. It's now your turn. Oh, I'm going to use 1 power to move this cultist right here. Okay, now it's this person's turn again. So it goes back and forth, action to action, which this one's a hard one because there's a lot of 2-player games where you take all of your actions and then your opponent takes all of their actions to respond. This is definitely following the design of I take an action, you respond. You take an action, I respond, and back and forth, back and forth. So it is somewhat of a very tactical chess match you can think of when you're playing this game. So I would say if you're a gamer that likes chess, you'll love this because it is just a back and forth kind of, here's my action, what's your response? Here's my action, what's your response? And that makes the design of this game, I think, flow really well. and it allows you to feel like you're not just getting overrun. Because the board, although does have a number of areas in it, you can move around this board pretty quickly, especially with the abilities that exist from your old ones. This is where these little icons at the very side of the board come into play. You can think of this board almost as a globe that wraps around. And if you're standing here in this C area, you're actually also standing here in this C area, which will allow you to be like, oh, I'm right here. Well, you can very quickly use one action point to move units, and now you're here, and now you're here, like, because you're actually also standing here. So that's the reason why there is kind of this back and forth, because you can move across this board very quickly when it's your turn. We've hit that. Now, one of the ways that we can end the game, you will notice at the very end here, if you can see, is a 30 game over. So once a player gets to that 30 game over, the game will start to, the end game will start to trigger. Now you can potentially earn more doom points, and what you'll do is you'll see the other side of this coin has just a plus 30. You'll flip that over and you'll start on 1 again, and you can potentially earn more doom points throughout the end, the ending phases of that you can call a round. But the game would essentially be over at that point. Now you will gain these doom points in the doom phase. We'll go through the number of phases that are in this game. And you will also gain doom points sometimes as part of a battle as well. So there's 2 different ways that you can kind of gain those doom points. So that's how the doom point track is going to work. The other thing that I'll call out here is the Ritual of Annihilation. This is another phase within the game. It is within the doom phase, and it is optional as well. And essentially, there will be this little token here that's pretty cool. It will point right to one of these Ritual of Annihilation bubbles. It starts with 5, it ends with 10. And all that means is if you want to activate, optionally, and each player can do this, well, there's another part of strategy here. You got to save your power to do it, because it will take you at least 5 power to activate a Ritual of Annihilation. And then there's a number of steps that you go through. Now, I will hit that right here in the book. It says here, for the Ritual of Annihilation, you'll spend power equal to the current position, we already talked about that, of where it's at. So I have to spend 5 power. I'd have to have that even after my battle and movement and everything else I was doing. So that's something as an opponent, if you see your opponent, or as a player, if you see your opponent like not using all their power, they're probably going to hit you with a Ritual of Annihilation. You advance the ritual marker 1 step, so the next time someone has to do the Ritual of Annihilation, it's going to cost 6, so it's good to kind of get in there early. You're going to advance your doom marker 1 space along the doom track for each gate you control. So after you control a number of gates, which just means gates are out there, and you have a single cultist that's sitting on that gate, you have taken control of that gate, you're going to gain doom for however many of those you have. So there's a way that you're going to gain doom. And then you gain 1 Elder Sign for each of your faction Great Old Ones in play. Normally no more than 1. So there are some factions that have 2 Great Old Ones that are part of them. Actually, the new faction that's coming up, I believe, is that way. The new box that's coming up is that way. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But most of them are all just going to have 1. You're going to gain one of these Elder Sign tokens right here. You're going to look at that secretly, but it's going to have a number on it, either 1, 2, or 3. And you can actually cash those in at certain points to gain yourself more doom along the doom track. So that's what these are going to be used for. Okay, and that's everything that's going to happen in the Ritual of Annihilation. If you want to activate that, the first player in that round is going to get the choice to say, hey, I want to do it first, right? And then if your opponent wants to do it as well, optionally, they would have to pay 6. Now, the interesting thing about the Ritual of Annihilation is as those are activated over the course of the game, they cost more and more to be activated. Now, it isn't just a straight 5 to 10. There's a 5, then 6, 7 and 7, 8 and 8, a 9, and then a 10. Now, if you're on 10 and then someone activates the Ritual of Annihilation again, it goes to instant death, which means the game is over. So that's another way that you can trigger endgame, is by executing a lot of those Ritual of Annihilations round to round. Okay, so that's how that track's going to work, and I like that as well. It's kind of an extra little thing. you don't really need the whole Ritual of Annihilation. You could have added different or other mechanics to be able to, gain Doom over the course of time, or make the Doom track less, and just forget about the whole Ritual of Annihilation concept. But I like the fact that it's sort of this extra optional thing that you can strategically plan for and either do it or not do it. Maybe you just gain all your Doom through battle and you don't do it through Rituals of Annihilation. And that's a choice you can make as a player. You can, because you got to save that power for the Ritual of Annihilation, and it does take a lot of your power. Now, when you get further towards end game, you will notice that this power track for each one of these does go all the way up to 20, and it is possible to get quite a bit of power as you get towards end game. So that's another interesting mechanic, and I really like that it's incorporated here in the duel version of the game as well. All right, let's hit the phases of the game, which we're going to just use here are, we'll just say the all the players reference sheet. I don't know, you can think of it this way. Again, it's something that's got to be passed around. I like that little right there with the player. You can see exactly what you're doing. Okay, so we got the phases of play. You're going to start with an action phase. Now, before you do your action phase, you're going to gain Doom also equal to unit costs whenever your opponent loses units due to your action or response. All right, so that's one of the ways that you're going to be able to gain that Doom based on combats and different things that might take place over the course of the action phase. So you're gaining Doom in action phase, you're gaining Doom in Doom phase. Okay, and then there's a number of different actions that you can take. We talked about that decay marker, how that works between the two players. Now you can recruit cultists. So you can recruit a cultist back on the board. And it will say right here again on your board what those costs are for those different monsters and cultists. You can summon a monster. Again, to be able to get monsters out, you have to have a controlled gates. That's one of the most important things that your cultists do, is move around the board, get gates out on the board, and then control those gates to be able to spawn monsters in through those gates. That's one of their main primary abilities. Except for if you're playing Black Goat here, there's actually a spell that will allow your cultists, and Great Cthulhu doesn't have that. There's actually a spell that will allow your cultists to be able to start to take place in combat and actually attack, which is pretty awesome. And that's probably one of the first type of spells you want to get out for Black Goat, is to allow their cultists to actually start attack. I love that. Okay, you can awaken your Great Old One. You can create a gate. That's one of the most expensive things. That takes 3 power to be able to do that. Outside of your Ritual of Annihilation, you can power a unit to be able to move. And that's just 1 power per unit to be able to move. And then you can power to battle. Again, that unit has to be able to have a combat value. Again, Great Cthulhu, those cultists, they can't battle, right? Because they don't have a fight combat value. Or you can just pass, which means you lose all your power. So there may be situations where you don't have a power enough to do what you want to do. You don't have enough power to do the Ritual of Annihilation. You can't really save power per se. So you just say, okay, I pass, and you just lose the rest of the power. Or you want to force your opponent to get hit with that decay maybe when you both only have a few power actions left. So there's a little bit of strategy there as well, where you may want to pass on purpose versus continuing to do things. Or if the player has 0 power, move the decay marker. So we talked about how the decay marker works. After those action phases are over, you're then going to go to the gather power phase. This is where you're going to gather back power for the next action phase. That's going to be based on a number of things that you're taking over the course of that turn. And we talked a little bit about that. But here specifically, you're going to get a power per cultist. You're going to get 2 power per controlled gate, 1 power per captured cultist, 1 power per abandoned gate. So that's just any abandoned gate each player gets. That benefits both players. And then you're going to gain power based on your special abilities too. So some of the factions may have a unique special ability. There may be something in your spell books that have been unlocked that gain you more power turn to turn. Round to round. So that's going to activate there as well. Now, one of the things we haven't talked about is the capturing strategy. So as there are cultists, lonely cultists, that are out by themselves, If at any point in time there's a cultist that cannot fight, so again, that's why it's important, I think, to get out the Black Goat's ability to be able to allow their cultists to fight. If there's ever a lonely cultist out by themselves, and a monster of the opposing faction moves into that area, and there's no other, you can think of them as protecting monsters from your side. Now, if this was to happen, it'd have to be a battle, okay? But if this protecting monster was not here and it was just a cultist, and I moved a monster in there, I could capture. Now, sometimes you can just kill and devour, which might be beneficial, but I could capture this cultist, which means now this cultist belongs to me. And I would put it on my board here. When we get to the gather power phase, I would get an extra power for the next round for every one of these cultists that I had captured. And then I would return that cultist to my opponent. Okay? Now, it wouldn't just return to the board, it would return to my opponent, and I would have to kind of bring it back out on the board and have to pay power for that. So there is a strategy there to do a lot of these like stealthy capturing, if you can, and taking advantage of those opportunities to be able to capture those cultists to give you more power upon the next round. So that's an important thing to keep in mind whenever your opponent is getting a little sloppy and just leaving cultists out there all by themselves, maybe trying to gear up to get gates upon the next round. You might want to move across the board quickly to try to capture those cultists to give you power and get them off the board, keeping them from being able to then get a gate upon the next round, because that's probably what they're trying to do. Okay, determine first player phase is kind of the next thing you're going to do. Player with the most power becomes the first player. So that's another very important thing as well. Gaining that extra power will allow you to be that first player upon the next turn. And what's important there is when you get to the Ritual of Annihilation, whoever the first player is the first person that has the ability to execute on the Ritual of Annihilation. So you see, although it's a very simple game, there's a lot of strategic tactical combat stuff that you need to have going on in your head to prep for that next round. I don't feel this is a game where you can prep multiple rounds out. It's just not. There's too much that's going to happen back and forth, but you definitely need to be thinking about what's going on this round, prepping and preparing for the next round. Absolutely love that. It's just such a great chess type match between those two players. Then you've got your Doom phase, which finalizes some of the phases of the game, and you start back with your action phase. In the Doom phase, again, we have that option of hitting those Ritual of Annihilation, and then there's going to be special events or abilities that are going to take place based on any of the spells and or unique abilities of your Great Old One, can take place within that Doom phase, kind of end the whole round. Then you're going to start back, you'll know who the first player is, and you'll get right into your action phase. So those are all the phases of the game. I feel like we've hit pretty much all the mechanics of the game outside of our fantastic dice here. When you do get into a battle, there's a number of things that are going to happen. We're not going to go through all of them in detail, but you do need to understand there is going to be pre-battle things that can happen based on spells that have been unlocked. There's going to be post-battle things that can happen. There's going to be during battle things that are going to happen. Outside of all of that, and it's very easy, it's right on your cards exactly what would happen and in what phase of that battle, you are going to be basically doing a dice-off, where you're going to be rolling dice depending on how many combat values you have within that area. And for every 6, that's a kill. For every 3 and 4, that's a pain, which means you have to move someone out of that area. They're basically just retreating. And for every 1, 2, and 3, it's a complete miss. So that's how that's going to work. And again, some of those post-combat and pre-combat abilities are going to affect what could be rolled on the dice or what's going to actually happen to the outcome of the roll of the dice. So that's another thing that I really like when it comes to combat. I wouldn't say that it's overly complex by any means, but there is a strategy in the spells that you unlock and in the order you unlock them when you would be going into combat, that would affect that. You may be a player that's just kind of keeping themselves away from combat to build up spells and or whatever strategy you're going for, and then all of a sudden you're in combat, which is which is interesting because you will find yourself, depending on your opponent's strategy, in combat. You could be in combat very, very quickly. So you're either going to be just heading into combat or you're on the run. So I really like the way that combat works as well. It's simple, but there's a number of things that can advance what happens as you're in that match or that battle. Okay? That is pretty much everything that I would say. There are some other minute rules here and here with how certain things play out and they're activated. I'm not going to get into that, but I think I've covered pretty much all the mechanics of the game. I would highly, highly recommend Cthulhu Wars Duel, regardless of if you are into the larger epic-style tabletop game, Cthulhu Wars, or if you know anything about it. Regardless of if you like that, I think this is a fantastically designed two-player strategy combat game. I think it's designed very, very well, and it really gives you a high level of value if you even know what Cthulhu Wars is already. So I recommend going and checking this out. Again, super low price point for the value and the gameplay that you're getting here. I don't actually own Cthulhu Wars, the tabletop game. I wish I did. It's probably one of the games that is one of my top all-time best gaming experiences. And I don't own the game. It's crazy. Like, I just don't own that game, but I need to get the full Cthulhu Wars game because it is awesome.
I love it.
I don't know. I could go on and on about that, but this video is not about that game. This video is about Cthulhu Wars Duel. So, team, go check it out. Get your hands on this game. Highly recommend it. Hit that like. Click the subscribe below to join the team. Keep rolling them crits. This has been the McGuire Review, and we'll see you next time.